Undisputed.
Oh, here we go on a lively, suspension-filled, fine-filled Friday. This is The Herd. Wherever you may be and however you may be listening, iHeartRadio, Fox Sports Radio, and FS1. Blazing 5, my strongest, I swear to you, of the year in 1 hour. Feel great with my Blazing 5. Joy Taylor from Pittsburgh. Mason Rudolph may have driven her nuts last night for the first 3.5 hours. You find yourself defending him after that debacle, that embarrassing league-wide debacle last night. Let's blame it on the Browns, not the NFL. What did you think?
Well, I mean, we're going to discuss that all day, but I mean, it's a rivalry and tensions are high, but you can never turn the game off. You got to watch the very last second.
You do. And let me start with that. The NFL has come down. Breaking news. Myles Garrett suspended indefinitely, out for the year, out for playoffs. So Cleveland thought they won last night. You're still behind the Steelers in the standings. Let me start with this. Stop defending Myles Garrett. Ohio, get off the internet. You've embarrassed yourself long enough in the league for your play. You're embarrassing yourself for defending Myles Garrett. If I jumped you in a bar and then 7 seconds later hit you over the head with a beer bottle, in those 7 seconds when I'm on top of you, you have a right to grab me wherever you want and swing wildly to defend yourself. Mason Rudolph was illegally attacked, a penalty, and then a guy 30 pounds heavier than him jumps on top of it. Myles Rudolph can do whatever the hell he wants for those 7 seconds between getting hit illegally, penalty, and getting hit over the head with a helmet. It's called self-defense. Okay, you knock me down and get on me and you're 40 pounds heavier, I'll scratch, claw, grab any part of you I want. That's called self-defense. That is a right in America, a judicial right. Forget sports. Stop it. This is 100% on Myles Garrett. You know what this is in baseball? This would be, I'm a pitcher, I throw at you, hit you, rush to the plate, grab the bat, and hit you over the fence. And you're making the pitcher the victim. No. Mason Rudolph has a right to self-defense as a 40-pound man heavier. 40 pounds heavier is attacking him. I mean, Myles Garrett's one of the NFL leaders in late hits and penalties. You don't know if the guy's wired right. After he throws the helmet, he's not. So this is 100% on Myles Garrett. I can't walk up to you, tackle you at a bar, be on top of you, and you can't fight back? You grab my eyes, you grab your car keys, you stab me, you do whatever. That's self-defense. Then I grab a bottle and bang you over the head with it. The cops aren't going to come in and go, you know, he stuck him with car keys in the neck. They're going to go, hey, good move. You got him off you. 100% Myles Garrett. Second thing is there's something called foreshadowing. You see it in movies. You see it in books. It's called foreshadowing. It's giving clues through a movie. You watch the end of the movie and you go, oh, those were little hints through the movie. A lot of foreshadowing in that game last night. 5 or 6 helmet-on-helmet hits by the Browns. That was very much Buddy Ryan in the 90s. That was very much Greg Williams. That was very much a message and a plan going into that game by Cleveland. That's called foreshadowing. The clues throughout the game. Now, Myles Garrett, because all through the game you're like, are these incidental helmet-on-helmet hits? These look, and then you watch that, the late hit on Mason in the helmet, foreshadowing. This was a game plan. Now, Freddie Kitchens got very defensive about that. What do people get defensive about when they're guilty? They get very defensive. Here's Freddie Kitchens, Cleveland's coach, after the game on that.
I never okayed fights. Did you say that? Did you say I okayed fights? I never okayed fights. Did I want them to get after their ass? Yes, I did. But that's not fighting. That's not after the whistle. But that's between the whistles, yes. I never condoned fighting on a football field because that's penalties. I don't coach penalties. I don't coach false starts. I don't coach after the whistle grabbing somebody's face mask. I don't coach that.
Yeah, either it's Greg Williams or Buddy Ryan, but there's messages dads and coaches can send, and there was clearly last night, they're coming to our place, multiple helmet-on-helmet hits, a Steeler bleeding from the ears, then the tackle late in the game on Mason Rudolph, game no longer in doubt, then the helmet. Freddie, nobody thinks you went in there and said, grab a helmet and hit Mason Rudolph. You don't have to, but there's a culpability and a responsibility as a head coach to, as an older man teaching younger men, words matter. And the messaging was clear last night from the opening kickoff. Be dirty and cheap. The third thing is, if Cleveland would have lost last night, Freddie Kitchens would be fired today because GM John Dorsey wants to fire him to save Baker Mayfield, who he should never have taken with the #1 pick, and the owner, Jimmy Haslam, wants to fire him, and maybe John Dorsey. But because Cleveland won, 2-game winning streak, chance to make the playoffs, I don't think so, but many do, they won't fire him. But Cleveland does now have an out. They can be martyrs. Freddie Kitchens is done. It doesn't matter what happens. Freddie Kitchens is done. First of all, they're not getting to the playoffs. They're not beating Baltimore. I don't think they're going to Arizona beating them. They're a mess. But now they can go, this was outrageous. John Dorsey can go, this is outrageous. This is an embarrassment to the organization. We do not teach that Freddie Kitchens must go. They would do that today if they lost. They would do it today. They'd have an out. They could be martyrs. But it's Cleveland, low self-esteem. I mean, listen, they're 2 games below 500 this morning, and they're all thinking they made the playoffs already. That's Cleveland in a nutshell. Pittsburgh this morning's, a 500 team, and they think we got to get our stuff together. You wake up this morning, Pittsburgh's still ahead of Cleveland. Cleveland's already, planning a parade for the playoffs. But Freddie Kitchens would be fired this morning if they lost the game. Because they want him out. Everybody knows they want him out, but Cleveland knows their reputation, the optics are horrible. They don't want to fire another coach after a Steeler game in the season, so they won't fire him. But now they have the out to fire him. They can be the martyrs. This is outrageous. This is disgusting. We feel terrible. This would never be condoned, although clearly the messaging last night, we know what it was. Once again, Myles Garrett out for the year, out for the playoffs. Baseball would do this if you hit somebody with a bat. A helmet weighs, 4 or 5 pounds, whatever it weighs. Inexcusable. I'm not going to go as far as to call it assault. It's sports assault. Outrageous, 100% in Myles Garrett. I think there was messaging by Cleveland going into that game. And let me then segue to this, because Cleveland does deserve, one person does deserve accolades. Baker Mayfield. Forget his play. I couldn't give a rip. After the game, though, last night, he was what he rarely is and what I criticize him for. He was a grown-up. He was adult. He was not emotional. He was bottom line. He was totally spot on talking about that vicious play by Myles Garrett.
I didn't see why it started, but it's inexcusable. I don't care, rivalry or not, we can't do that. That's kind of the history of what's been going on here lately, hurting yourself, and that's just endangering the other team. It's inexcusable. He knows that. I hope he does now. You know what? The reality is he's going to get suspended. We don't know how long, and that hurts our team. And we can't do that. We can't continue to hurt this team. It's inexcusable.
Tip of the cap, Baker Mayfield. That's what quarterbacks should say. No excuses. Don't blame Mason Rudolph like the idiotic Brown fans. Totally on us. Totally inexcusable. And by the way, golf clap to Baker Mayfield, who I'm very critical of. Spot on. Inexcusable. But it's not going to change. And this is why Baker's never going to reach his ultimate potential. Baker Mayfield's a lot better than we've seen this year. He's not as good as we saw him at the end of last year against Cincinnati twice, but he's a lot better than this. But he'll never reach his potential in the NFL. He may make a Pro Bowl as a backup, but I covered the Portland Trail Blazers. Oregonian newspaper called them the Jail Blazers, gave them that term because they were so dysfunctional. The reason they were that dysfunctional is because the general manager, a very smart guy who I like, Bob Whitsitt, didn't care about character. That was the coach's issue. And Bob would just go find players that personalities didn't match, they weren't responsible, they weren't adult, the chemistry stinks, and he would just give it to the coach and say, figure it out. That's John Dorsey. By the way, do you know the Browns actually released a wide receiver before the game last night? Anthony Callaway, knucklehead, drafted, everybody else passed. This is what John Dorsey is. So Baker Mayfield's going to have to overcome goofy teammates, immature teammates, teammates who hit people with helmets, teammates who get thrown off the team before a Thursday night game with the Steelers. This is what Baker Mayfield's reality is. When you have a general manager, and I covered one, and he was really smart, and I think John Dorsey's really smart, and Bob Whitsitt could see talent. I'll never deny that, and John Dorsey can see talent, but there are these guys that run these teams that don't care about chemistry. They don't care about, maturity. And I covered one, and Dorsey's one. He doesn't care. He doesn't care. OBJ who, by the way, is not a character issue, but is a personality. Bring him in for Baker. Kareem Hunt, bring him in. Callaway, bring him in. Coach will figure it out. Well, maybe that works if you got Pete Carroll or Mike Tomlin or Bill Belichick. It doesn't work if you got Freddie Kitchens, who probably shouldn't even be a head coach. So the reality to Baker Mayfield's career, suboptimal owner, GM that doesn't give a rip about character, and fourth coach in 3 years starting next year, because Freddie's done. That guaranteed it last night. He'll never reach his potential. Doesn't mean, Baker's better than what you're seeing. Baker's better than this year. There's no question. But Patrick Mahomes is talented enough to overcome Carson Wentz, Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. These guys are talented enough. I mean, Andrew Luck overcame a impulsive owner, bad GM, terrible line, wrong coach. Baker's not that. He's not Luck. He's not Deshaun. He's not that. He's a fine young quarterback who, with a very competent, experienced coach, Mike McCarthy, with a very good GM who surrounds him, Chris Ballard, with good character guys, an owner that's not impulsive but patient. Baker could end up with a nice 12-year career, make a Pro Bowl or two maybe as a backup in the AFC, get to a playoff game or two, win one or two. Not a Super Bowl guy having to carry a team, but this is what he's going to have to deal with. Last night, did anybody watch that game last night? Did you learn anything about Cleveland? They're the most undisciplined team I've ever seen in my life. Even when they win, you're like, oh, I don't feel good about that. Same with Buffalo. Last week, we're like, yeah, they won, but, they just see them in the red zone. My stomach hurts. Just a mess. Blazing 5 and 50 minutes. Coming up, the one thing that was crystal clear after watching the Steelers and the Browns last night, again, Myles Garrett suspended indefinitely, out this year, out playoffs if they get there. That's coming up. Wild day today. Blazing 5 and 45 minutes. Listen, this week, Simply Safe, Great Home Security, is offering my listeners their best deal of the year. So listen up. 25% off any new system